This story in The Australian today that we're going to take a look at is brilliant for many reasons, but primarily because it is a real-world, coal-face example of how hopeless EVs are as a one-size-fits-all solution to cutting emissions. I've always said on this channel that I don't dislike EVs in principle, apart from when they catch fire and burn down houses or apartment blocks, that is, but I believe that the blinkered all-or-nothing approach of governments mandating EVs to the exclusion of everything else is pure madness. Yes, they may make up a future fleet comprising internal combustion, hybrid and pure EV. But to think that battery EVs could ever replace all other drivetrain technology is just crazy ideology. This is a classic example of someone who was seduced by salesmen and politicians into believing that an EV was a simple drop-in solution for a regular car. And as she eloquently puts it, in the end, she was mugged by reality. I urge everyone to heed this lesson. Welcome back to MGUY, British engineer and lawyer, now Sydney-based YouTuber. Be sure to follow me on the usual socials for more content, links in the description, and please make sure you're subscribed and have enabled all notifications so you don't miss out on any future videos. Writer and broadcaster Gemma Tognini writes, "For those of you joining this conversation for the first time, a quick recap. I have been, since early 2023, Australia's least enthusiastic EV owner. I went down that road as a wide-eyed, sweet child of summer. Literally, I picked up the car in February last year and initially was enamoured. It's fast, goes like a shower of the proverbial, too clever by half, seriously impressive. And when the enthusiastic salesman said that, like me, he didn't have the capacity to charge his car at home, but reassured me it was no big deal, I ran headfirst into the mist. He also said he'd driven his EV all the way from Sydney to Perth, blithely saying it just needed a little planning ahead. Who was I to argue? It was like he was straight from central casting, sent to lure me with honey-coated words about convenience and reliability and tax breaks. And it's this economy with reality which is why so many people for whom an EV is the worst possible idea still continue to buy them, only later to discover the very many problems and drawbacks. I didn't just drink the Kool-Aid, I bathed in it, gargled it, mainlined it into my veins. But it wasn't long before I got mugged by reality. My traumatic search for a working charging station in the New South Wales Southern Highlands last May still haunts me. That was a brutal awakening. The relief I felt on that Saturday morning a few weeks back, charging my car in a shopping centre car park for the last time, palpable. And this is the key message from this article, which reflects precisely what this channel has said. Electric vehicles are not the answer. They may be one answer for one cohort of people, but they are not the answer, the global, in a metaphorical sense, answer. And they are not the automotive messiah many zealots would have you believe, that government policy would have you believe. They are not the answer to every question. Dissecting this very thing a few months back with some Canberra-based friends of the political persuasion, I observed that EVs were the perfect car for people who had mainly an inner-city, urban-based existence, who didn't go into the country much, and who had the luxury of being able to charge their cars at home. All the ducks needed to line up for it to work. My friend responded dryly, "Who do you think is designing government policy in this space?" Well, I know the answer. Idiots like Albo and Bowen, that's who. Career politicians driven by ideology and a need to keep the commie greens on side, who don't have a single scientific or engineering brain cell between them to critically evaluate the practicality or otherwise of their policy decisions. Perhaps they should all be forced to live with an EV for a few months without the benefit of off-street parking and charging, or the taxpayer-funded chargers in the Parliament House car parks, and having to undertake interstate journeys now and again, and then let's see what they think of the idea. I'm happy to hold my own experience up for ridicule and mockery. It's a small price to pay, unlike the price of an EV, and unlike the cost benefit of running one. When I ended my relationship with my Tesla, I did one final check of my car stats to find out how much I had saved in fuel costs across the past 12 months. A grand total of $524, so $42 a month. Apart from the fact these days that will buy me a pack of loo paper and a bag of Doritos, if you offset that against the cost of my time spent sitting in car parks waiting for it to charge, let me promise you, it's a net negative, a significant one. This country has enough productivity issues without creating more by trying to force every single person to live the socialist utopian dream. Oh my God, this is all so true. She goes on to talk about the almost religious fervour with which renewables are pushed to the exclusion of everything else, including nuclear. Despite them being more expensive, yes, they are way more expensive despite what the government tells you, and hopelessly intermittent and unreliable. She concludes, "There are many people in my life with EVs who love them, for whom EVs work and meet their needs and circumstances. Fantastic. But they are not for everyone. If we're honest, the mad, singular push towards EVs is consistent with the all-or-nothing approach adopted by industry lobby groups and carried, seemingly without being tested at all, by energy-illiterate ministers who prefer ideology above all else. If an EV works for you, fantastic. You'll find me at the servo, pumping gas and singing a merry tune along the way." Go and read the whole article at the link in the description. It's a great read, but a sobering lesson for anyone vaguely considering an EV in preference to a hybrid or regular gas car. I've said this before, but governments are truly terrible at picking winners. And you can bet if they tell us all to buy battery EVs, they will flop, which is precisely what's happening. People are heading towards hybrids in droves. Good for them. They're far more efficient, far more practical, and require far less of the environment-destroying mining for minerals and metals that enormous EV batteries require. But try telling this to tin-eared idiots like Albo and Bowen, and they will simply do the fingers in the ears and sing la 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 trick, because nothing they do is based on practical solutions. It's all based on ideology. And the only people who will suffer from this insane EV policy is, as usual, yes, you've guessed it, us poor suckers.